So we're going to transport you 2 hours up the M6 to the sunny, rainy city of Manchester. Tell you a little bit about what we've been doing. So I'm Nicky Parker. I'm from Manchester City Council, and I'm from the bit of the council that is working in an integrated way with health, and we're called the Manchester Local Care Organisation, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that later.
Lovely. My name's Helena Zaum. I've probably introduced myself to one or two of you before. My role at Microsoft is all about looking at digital innovation in local and regional government. So I spend most of my time working with really exciting customers and sometimes partner suppliers on how they're using data and digital in new and innovative ways. In practice, that means I'm really passionate about health and social care and health and care integration. I've been working with Nicky for 18 months or so-ish, I think. We lose track of time a bit.
So what would be good is to see who's in the room. So you need to get your phones out and get that app thing going again. So we'll just give you a second to do that. We're going to do this more frequently than... This is about technology, so we wanted to use technology. So once you've got it out, keep it on your lap because we're going to use it quite a bit. Okay, so you need to scroll through the programme, and if you've not used it before, get to the bit that says us to, click on that, and at the bottom it says polls or something like that. Okay, so the first question, I presume you can see it now, is where are you from? So we'd just like to have just a little bit of an understanding where everybody's from. So you could click one of those options. I hope we've covered everybody. If we haven't, shout out later.
Space. Oh, here we go.
Great. Oh, it's lost a few.
Oh, maybe there's nobody there from overseas.
Yeah, where's Northwest gone?
Northwest, where are you?
There's loads of people here from the Northwest. I can see them all.
They've moved out.
I've had to pay them all not to ask hard questions. Okay, so there's a few Have the Northwest people not learned how to use the app yet? Can you just press Northwest? Too late. Okay. Right. Yeah, there's half of them missing off there. Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. Oh, okay. So, next one, we'd quite like to know what you do, so we know what kind of audience we're talking to. So there's another question popped up, which is about describing your role. So which sector are you from?
I think the Northwest is working out how to use the app.
I always let you down. Oh, good.
Whoa.
Lots of local government people. Yeah. Okay, so we'll pitch it in that direction. We've got some commissioners as well, some independents, and some NHS people. Great.
Fantastic.
So lots of local government people in the room. Okay.
Lovely. If we can go back to the presentation.
Yeah, don't know how to do that. It's not.
Yeah, we'll wait for the clever people up there somewhere. There we are.
Okay, so another question, but there's no poll this time. Just have to shout out. Anyone in here ever been on a Saturday night out in Manchester in the 80s or the 90s? There's a reason I'm asking. Oh, look, loads of people. So loads of people have heard of the Hacienda. And so Hacienda is a club in the 80s or 90s in Manchester, owned and run by this guy, Anthony H. Wilson, but he was also on the telly, known as Tony Wilson. And we had a bit of a hard time in the 80s. We had a real economic downturn. The city wasn't looking like it looks now. It was really down at heel. And of course we had the bomb. And as we kind of pulled ourselves up after that, and this phrase he coined, which is everywhere in Manchester. So this is Manchester, and we do things differently here. So we're going to tell you a little bit about some of the different things we're doing. But when we get to the next slide, and it tells you a little bit more about some of the challenges we're facing, there's a question that we're asking ourselves, and we've been asking it a lot in the last week. We've had some staff sessions this week. We've been asking this question. But also a question or a challenge to put out to the audience is, have things got so bad right now in our sector that just doing things differently is not good enough, and we're going to have to do some different things. And that's kind of the theme for the rest of this afternoon. The rest of our session is about what different things might we have to do as we sort of move on. Okay, so this is a map of the tram in Manchester. Those of you who've been to Manchester recently or currently working there will recognise it. So the dots are the stations, and you will see, if you can find Cornbrook on there, which is right in the middle, kind of at 12 o'clock, that's more or less the city centre. If you look at that number there, that is average life expectancy for a man living in Manchester city centre right now. It's 72, which is pretty shocking. So in terms of population health management, we've got some big issues to deal with. So life expectancy is 72. Healthy life expectancy is 55. So quite a lot of people don't get to be old in Manchester because they have such significant health issues that they have a shorter life, and normal life begins to change around about age 55. So that's not great health outcomes by any stretch of the imagination. And we've got a second really big issue, which is around about our budget. So we've heard loads about that this morning, but Manchester Council's lost 40% of its budget, so there's no way it can continue to do the same things. It really does have to start doing some different things, and just doing things differently, we're past that stage. So not only have we got a big budget loss, but the value of properties in Manchester means that the council tax value is quite low. So it doesn't matter if we have a 2% precept and we can take a bit more council tax and put it towards social care, because that is only going to add up to another 3 million, and our budget gap is 157 million. So that puts it into a context. We really, really have to do some different things. And the other challenge that we face in terms of the health and social care budget is that 5% of the population are spending 55% of the budget. So that shows you the level of difficulties that we're facing in terms of people who've got more than one long-term condition, the health, and it reflects what I was talking about there, about the healthy life expectancy being so low. So it really, really is time to do some different things. So you don't say Manchester very often these days without saying devolution, so most people know what that is, but this is our solution to some of those issues that we have identified already. So we know, like every other local authority, we've been through a whole process of making efficiencies, being more productive, cutting things, and we just came to a realisation after we'd done the first Devo deal that actually it would be much better if the city had control over its own health and social care system, and it's the only place in the country that does have complete control over its health and social care system. What it's enabled us to do is streamline what we do. So that's the boring stuff that you have to do first to get your kind of ducks in a row before you can then go off and do the exciting things. So we moved from 7 hospitals to 1 hospital trust. That was a really big job for somebody else. Great, not me. And then we moved from 3 CCGs to 1 CCG, and then we merged that CCG in a partnership with the council. So we've got 1 commissioning organisation. So that makes things a lot easier. With 1 budget that's pooled, and in theory we can move around to wherever it needs to be, from primary care to acute, back to social care, we can to the voluntary sector. We can spend it on where we think we're going to have the biggest impact. So this has really started to help us think about things in a completely different way, because we're going to reward success. So if you think about a continuum of spend where this is the cheap end and this is the expensive end, if we do less of this, we can move some of this to this end, which means more prevention, more early intervention, which means over 10 years, which is the length of our contract, we could really begin to make a difference. And we're not going to do that in year 1. We have to use year 1 to design some new care models, remodel the workforce, do all of that kind of thing. But once we get going on this, and we're just at the end of year 1, we're coming up to the end of year 2 now, when we're already seeing some improvements, the theory goes, and it's a big risk because nobody's done this before, but if we can lessen spend at this end, which for the council would be residential and nursing homes, with more home care, prioritise home care over residential and nursing care because people tell us they want to live at home. And for the hospital, that means reducing the number of admittances and really reducing the number of readmittances, reducing length of stay and reducing the big backlog and detox that we've got. So there's some of the big challenges, and we just think that reorganising this architecture around streamlining it and making it more easy will really, really help us get going. So we created this thing called the local care organisation. So it's primary care, mental health, community health and adult social care and the voluntary sector. Okay, and we've reorganised the city into 12 integrated neighbourhood teams. So there are some things that we just do at city level. They tend to be expensive and more specialised. We just need one of those. We do some things at locality level where it makes more sense to reflect the old way the city used to be run north, centre and south. Where we try and streamline it and make it standardised, but to run it and operate it in three different sections. So things like, for council people, like our reablement service would be there. And then everybody else is integrated into one of these 12 neighbourhood teams, integrated neighbourhood teams. They're primary care led. We've got dedicated primary care people that are heading up these teams. The management, day-to-day management of the teams can be from any disciplines. We went through a whole process. We've got all sorts of people running those, including new people from outside of the NHS and Manchester, but also people like social workers, people like advanced nurse practitioners, people like GPs, all sorts of people are running these teams, and they each look after a patch of about 50,000 people. They're not quite coterminous yet with the new primary care networks, but that's another thing that we have to do. And then right down to services for people at home. And this is the territory that we're in now and that we wanted to talk about, is some of the services that we want to provide to people at home. So the last slide about context from me. Last slide about context from me. So here's our proposition. Can we develop a person-centred, data-driven system to manage population health in Manchester? Not exclusively, and nothing else goes on, but in terms of technology, could we develop a person-centred, data-driven system to manage the way we manage population health in Manchester? Could we use live data from tech devices in people's homes, things like the Internet of Things, things like falls technology, GPS technology, geofencing, loads and loads of other things that we've been piloting, integrated, and this is the critical bit, with other data that we're holding on people from their GP record, from their acute record, from their mental health record, from their social care record, from their ambulance record. Could we manage that in one place with a single view of the person so that it's live? Because those other things are not quite live, are they? They're the last time you interacted with those services. Your adult social care assessment is, in the very least, a year old. It's probably 2 years old. We've got a bit of a backlog, like most places. But what the tech gives us an ability to do is look at live data. How hot or cold is it in someone's house? Have they got out of bed yet? Have they gone to the loo today? Have they turned the kettle on? Have they fallen? Have they gone for a wander? Have they gone outside their geofence? All that kind of information. Could we use that to help us triage and stream people away from hospital? So that's our big, big proposition. So could we use all that data to support people to live at home for longer? Could we reduce hospital admissions and readmissions? Could we do something around those better health outcomes? Can we get those ages up a little bit from 55 and 72? Can we increase, sorry, my microphone's messing about. Could we increase our preventative work and our early intervention work? Could we reduce length of stay and detox? And in the local government context, can we save some money? And if we save some money, can we put some of it in that big pot of 157 million, and can we reinvest some of it in doing more of this stuff? So that what does return on investment of all of that look like? And if it's a big amount, it's a big proposition. If it's a big amount, could we put some of it towards doing this again next year? And could we put some of it in the savings pot? So we want to build a whole new way of working. So reflecting what people said on the panel earlier on, this absolutely, definitely is not a technology project. This is using technology to bring about whole system change, because you can't just give people a load of technology and expect it all to be amazing and just work, and what you're going to do with all that data. Loads of big questions about how we're going to manage the data, where we're going to store the data, what we're going to do with it, how we're going to triage people, how we're going to stream people. So we need loads of new care models wrapped around it. We need a whole new workforce strategy. So we're using technology and the opportunities that it gives us, not only to manage people in a live environment, but to change the whole system around them. So it's quite an ambitious program. So where we're up to is we've done a soft market test. We've seen loads of different things. We're now building a platform, or about to build a platform, that all the different data sources will all feed into, which will present a single view of the person who lives in Manchester. And we're starting to think about what a control room environment to put all of that in might look like, and who would work in there, and what kind of different kind of professionals would work in there, and how we'd use it to stream, triage and stream. So workforce, just want to talk about workforce for 1 second. The workforce change here is absolutely massive. So we've got loads and loads of people who have done the same job for a long time. Think about in Manchester, people love working in the city. Lots of people live in the city as well as their families, and they're like working in the same place. So there's not a big turnover. So people on the whole have been doing the same job in the same way for quite a long time. And we're trying to completely disrupt that. So it's not fair to leave them doing their old job in their old way with their old systems and processes. So this can't just be led by me and Helena and some of my colleagues that are in the room. This has to be whole-scale change from the bottom up. So we've put loads and loads of effort into the workforce element. We've got all sorts of different new roles and new ways of working. You've probably heard already about the pirates. We've got a pirate mentality. We've got a group of people who call themselves pilots, who are the absolute frontline disruptors, who are challenging and breaking some of the rules and rewriting the rules and retelling how it needs to be to their colleagues. We've got activators, which is your more kind of normal standard frontline facing staff who are really keen champions and wanting to do things. We've put lots of effort into staff engagement. We've done loads and loads of staff engagement across the whole integrated neighbourhood team piece, not just with social care, although our first phase is predominantly about social care. We've been putting training on, we've been working with TSA, we've helped rewrite some training material, and we're piloting that now for TSA. And one of my colleagues is working with TSA on a new qualification. And we would like to put all our staff, all 3,500 of them, through that, so that we've got some good quality and standards behind what we're doing. We're also talking to loads of other people. NHSX have been to see us. We've talked to their Director of Data, so we make sure that we're doing all the right things around data. And it's better to talk to people now, we think, than wait until we've done it. So I'm going to hand over to Helena. She's going to talk some of the techie stuff to you.
Lovely.
There you go.
Thank you. Actually, before we move on to that, can we have our third question, just to get you guys all involved? So we wanted to find out a little bit more about how your rollout of digital tech is going. How far down the journey are you? So I'm hoping it's going to appear in a minute, as if by magic. Oh, there we go. So have you started yet? Are you piloting, and I see a lot of piloting going on? Or are you actually rolling out already? There we go. Everyone's like coming off sleep mode on the phone. Oh, there we go. Oh, there we are. Piloting. Well, that's fantastic, isn't it? Because it means everybody's out of the starting blocks, which is great. And, you know, certainly we see a lot of piloting going on. And I think a real challenge, as we discussed on some of the panels earlier, actually, is about how to share some of that best practice. And it's great to see the TSA playing a role in that. Lovely, great. I'll have my slides back if that's all right. Fantastic. So I just wanted to talk you through a little bit more, and don't worry, I won't go too technical, but a little bit more about the operating model and some of the technical information about how Nicky and the team are seeking to achieve this. So on the left-hand side of the diagram, you can see 3 boxes: the SPA, which sounds like a great place to be, technology-enabled care, which Nicky's just spent some time talking to you about, and also the integrated adult social care front door. So as part of our getting to know you process, Nicky explained to me that at the moment you have some 137 front doors in Manchester. That's an awful lot of front doors to walk through, and I guess it's no surprise that sometimes people get into the wrong one. So there's a big team working at the moment on both physical integration and also streamlining of all of those different systems and offerings on the front door. The really, really exciting point about this whole transformation for me is, as I've mentioned before, I'm passionate about bringing data together from lots of different sources. In the system that Nicky and the team in Manchester are looking to set up, the idea is that alerts from various different parts of the system and from people, from carers, maybe from wearables, maybe from the homes themselves, will all come into one single point of triage. And the idea that the team are testing out at the moment is whether or not a command centre based approach might be interesting, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that might be. But the idea is that the professionals who sit within that command centre are able to have all the information they need to make good decisions for people at their fingertips. They can do a triage if, they will do a triage if they need to talk to some colleagues. They can have a multidisciplinary team meeting in time, probably virtually as well as, in person. And that will allow them then to stream the particular alert, the particular need that has come in into the right place. And a really important point about that, of course, is that if they have lots of different options, and this is on the right-hand side of the screen, if they have different options to choose from, then actually all of a sudden they can start to better help people while they're still at home, instead of hopping into an ambulance as a default. So it's quite an exciting and ambitious model, as Nicky's described. Right, here's for the techie slide. Sorry, that to happen. So I just want to use this really to explain to you the different phases. This is in some respects a big bang project, but actually the way that Nicky and the team are going about it is very agile, which is the way that most technical projects these days are delivered. So phase 1, which is the bit in the orange box, it is orange, not red today, so that's good, has been all about pulling together some of the digital strategy for devices, and Nicky's spoken to you a lot about the really super approach that they've taken there on testing lots, chucking some out, and then actually starting to really kind of craft and work with suppliers on what those devices need to do. Really important, though, for the people who are going to work in the command centre, though, is that they don't have to check 6 different portals to see what's happening and where the alert's coming from. So the next part of phase 1 is to pull all of that information together into a data platform. It's going to bring in some other information as well, Nicky, isn't it? So information from portals, from carers and the third sector as well. But what that will do is allow people to start to actually use this information for live management of people. And also the idea of phase 1 is that Nicky and the team can start to get a little bit further down the journey, down to the left, in fact even beyond the left, into the predictive space, and try and work out who they might need to help a little more intensively to stop them landing at the expensive right-hand side of the system. Phase 2 will hopefully be a control room, and as I say, I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. I know I keep saying that, but I will, I promise. And also pulling in the Lycra record, which is on the boil at the moment in Manchester, Nicky, isn't it? Yes. So, what on earth is a command centre? So I think the best analogy to use here is of air traffic control. So I don't know about you, but when me and my family head off to the airport with the 3 kids, which is always quite stressful, you don't need any additional stress of worrying that the air traffic controllers might not know where your plane is or where Nicky's plane is when she's flying back from one of her trips. You want to know which gate you need to go to, and you want to know that your suitcase is going to arrive. So in short, you want all different bits of the system to be joined up. And as we know, and Manchester's certainly not alone here, people's experience of health and care at the moment is very disjointed. And actually, as a result of that, it's also quite impersonal. So the idea really that Nicky and the team are exploring is if they pull not only the human resources together, but also the information resources from across the system, can they deliver therefore a more integrated and personalised approach? Because that will be better for the system, but most of all, it will be better for Manchester people, and there won't be any aeroplane crashes. So this is a diagram just to talk a little bit more about what that actually might mean in practice. So a shared physical space for people working in the command centre, the ability to take joined up action across the system, co-location also of decision makers, and I think Nicky's touched on this a little bit, and I think that this will be an evolution of a journey of new ways of working, different processes, and different ways, different means of taking action for people earlier on. The idea of this is that it will use real-time information, but it will also learn. So it will get into the predictive space of saying, actually, 9 times out of 10, somebody who's had the following journey through our system will end up in hospital in a week's time if we don't take some action. And so the hope very much is, as Nicky mentioned before, that the team will be able to get onto the left-hand side, intervene for people earlier while they're still at home, which after all is where they want to be. Now Nicky's going to talk to you a little bit about investment and business cases and other really, really important aspects. There you go.
Thank you. Just to take that example a bit further about the potential around prediction, we did a piece of work earlier in the year where we just looked at high volume, high cost admissions to hospital. So we started to look at hips, so broken hips. We just picked it randomly. No, we didn't. We picked it on purpose because we know it's expensive. So 882 people broke their hip last year in Manchester in an unplanned way and had to have an emergency admission to hospital to have it fixed. That's at a cost of 24 million to the city. So it actually worked out about half and half when we did the sums. So it's about half to the NHS for the cost of the operation and the stay in hospital and the outpatients that followed, and half to the council for additional home care, reablement, and in some cases residential nursing care. And before we even talk about the money, it's not a great outcome when you break your hip. We just don't want people to break their hips. So we started to look back at what had happened to those 882 people in the 2 years leading up to them breaking their hip. And we started to see some patterns. Now, we had to do this manually just to kind of prove to ourselves that we had quite a good idea here. Now, in future, the system will be able to do that for us. It will give us a report that says every now and again, these are the people aged over 65 who have broken their wrist this year. And we can wrap some care around those people to try and stop them going on to break their hips, because in the work we did, the manual work that we did and all the analytics, over 85% of people had broken their wrist in the 18 months leading up to breaking their hip. And you can kind of see how that's happened, can't you? You can see they fall over a few times and our wonderful response team go out and pick them up and put them in a chair and ring somebody and make them a cup of tea, and no further action required because they haven't injured themselves. We've put a little extra step there. This is why I'm talking about whole system change. So they're now referred on to falls training, and we take them if they need to go. So we've kind of stopped them even getting to the bit where they're going to break their wrist. But inevitably, more falls, maybe a couple of trips to hospital, and eventually you end up with a broken wrist in nearly all cases. And because they just get their wrist fixed and they come back home, they might have a bit more falls training, but because we haven't wrapped the whole of their integrated neighbourhood team around them, they will inevitably go on and fall again and break their hip. And that can be disastrous. Some of them have died, some of them have never gone home. And when you look at the national indicator about where you are 120 days after you've broken your hip, the national target and performance is around about 60 to 70% of people are back home, and that is absolutely definitely not the case in Manchester. Less than 50% of people are back home 3 months after they've broken their hip. So you have to ask, where are they? And if they're not at home, where are they? Well, some of them have passed away, some of them have had to go and live somewhere else, and some of them are back in hospital and not for the first time. And the ones who are back in hospital and the ones that are living somewhere else are the ones that are putting additional cost into the system. So there's another opportunity, not only when they first start falling over, to send them off for falls training, not only when they break their wrist, but when they come out of hospital, to wrap some intensive care around them at home with our new integrated neighbourhood teams, so that they're not somewhere else at 120 days, they're back at home. And the additional cost it costs us to put that support round is far, far cheaper than allowing them to break their hip and keep going back into hospital. Yeah. So it took us a long time to do that, because we had to do that manually. Yeah. But that's what we want the system to do, and we've come up with loads of other groups of people, cohorts of people that we think this could apply to.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I think, Nicky, you mentioned earlier on in the presentation that the idea really is to move money, if possible, from the right-hand end of the system to the left. But I think in order to make the case for that, it's really important to have solid data so that you know that you're making the right choices and decisions. And that's, you know, another aspect of this, really.
So that's a nice link to my next slide.
It's beautiful.
So we have got a lot better at writing business cases. I think probably we were a bit rubbish at this about 2 years ago. We just didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't know how to track people. We didn't know how to cost things up. We didn't really understand the national tariff. We're from local government. We didn't understand all of the way the health system works. And we've really spent a lot of time understanding that now, understanding average length of stay, national tariff. You can quite easily, using the Green Book, work out how much it will cost if you don't do anything. And you can easily, of course, work out how much investment you need. We're very lucky in Manchester, as part of the devolution deal, the second devolution deal, which is when health and social care were integrated, there was a transformation fund. So all the different local authorities in Manchester bid for that, and Manchester got 50 million. So out of that 50 million, which sounds a lot, but isn't actually when you start thinking about how broad the remit is, it's everything that is not in hospital. It's a lot. It's as big as the hospital. When you look at the budgets, they're both about £1 billion each. So we've got 50 million to design about 6 or 7 new care models, and we bid for some money for technology-enabled care. We got about £1 million. So I went from having no money to, well, I had a little bit of money from the revenue budget to do the pilots, but I certainly couldn't scale it up from the revenue budget. So the Greater Manchester Transformation Fund helped us to get going with this, but it's, you know, you get nothing for free, and we had to demonstrate a really good return on investment. So this is when we've got really quite good now at working out, for every £1 you spend, how much you can put back in the system. So you don't get anything if you can't put £3 back in the system. And the £3 is moving the money from this expensive end. So £1 stays there, because we don't want them not to have any money either. £1 goes in the pot, and £1 goes back into funding it for next year. So you only get the money for 1 year, and you have to turn it around that quickly so that you can deliver the £3 so that the whole thing is self-sustainable after that. So we did a 3-year plan. We got ourselves up to £15 by year 3, because just using the different predictive models that we worked out that we could get up to £15. In the pilots, we're already on to about £9, so I think the £15 is doable. The accountants tell me not to say that, but I think it is more doable than £15. I think once we scale this up massively, which is what we are about to do, I think we will deliver quite a lot of return on investment. And the additional issue about that is, of course, and it helps when you're integrated and you've got partnership agreements, is trying to get the money out of the block contract is quite difficult. So we also need a plan B around, we might not get all of that money. We can't start taking £15 out of the acute system with no notice. So we're going to have to phase this in, and we're looking to develop some income generating schemes to help us with that. We've got lots of interest from other local authorities in the Northwest and from housing people who want to come on this journey with us and help fund some of this. So that will help us keep going for a couple of years till we really start to release the return on investment. And you know, it's that same old saying, once you get a bit of money, you get a bit more money. You just need to get going, really. So Innovate UK came along with their CityVerve Smart programme, Smart Cities programme. We wrote a bid and we won. We were the only city in the UK that got the money. So that was 10 million that came to Manchester, of which we got about $750,000 for technology-enabled care. And what we did there, actually, was that's where we piloted the Internet of Things. So we'd not piloted any of that. So that's about 3 years ago. We started on the Internet of Things. We've got a really good program going on with some of our housing providers. And when we scale up in the next bit, we will now roll that out to private households. But at the moment, it's just with housing providers because we needed a kind of a controlled experiment to be able to collect data. So Innovate UK gave us some money, Greater Manchester Transformation Fund gave us some money, and then I just thought, do you know what, I'm just going to go for it. So I wrote a bid for 5 million quid from the council's IT programme. Social care has never really had any money from the IT programme. It has to upgrade its social care system, but for nothing else. And because we had done the tracking of everybody, because we could show the return on investment, because we'd started to get some external funding, they gave us the money. So there's another 5 million gone in the pot, which is why we're now able to scale up and why we were able to then move to a soft market test and to start creating some things of our own. So we've been working with a few providers to modify their devices and streamline them a bit, because we don't want people teched up with about 20 different devices on. We want them just to wear one device that can do lots of different things. There isn't a social care platform that you can just go and buy and plug everything in. So we looked. In fact, Helena looked for me all over the world. We couldn't find one. So we've had to engage a company to help us start to design that. So the money from the council will pay for the platform as well. I've still got my little bit of money from the revenue budget to pilot new things, because we don't just want to start off. We're going to start off with 5 devices on the platform, but then we want to move to a next phase with another 5 and another 5. So there's like a continual cycle of trying new things, which the revenue budget will pay for. And then we're working currently with the British Space Agency and the European Space Agency on their GPS programme. I'm hoping in the next week that they're going to give us a lot of money. So watch this space. So we're the only health and social care partnership working with them. They've got all these big satellites up there that can do GPS tracking, and then underneath their big satellites there's lots of new little satellites which are actually doing most of the work these days. So the big satellites have got lots of capacity on them, so they're looking to see what other uses they can make of the GPS technology on the other big satellites. So hopefully in about a week's time we'll be able to announce a big announcement about some money from them. But that's not enough for us. So the investment is great. The return on investment is challenging. But the way we do procurement in Manchester is also challenging. It's the same as every other local authority. We go through the OJU processes, and procuring innovation is very, very difficult because you quite often don't know what you want. You can't write a specification. If you want to buy a chair or a table or a pack of toilet rolls, it's great because you just go and look on whichever framework sells toilet rolls and you buy the best quality at the best price. But when you're in this territory, it's really, really difficult. So not only are we challenging the health and social care system to change, but we've started to challenge the way the corporate core in the council works. So procurement have had to roll back from the, oh my God, you can't do that, to how we can help you to do that. Finance colleagues have had to chip in and learn all about the Green Book and the National Health Tariff so that they can help us with the return on investment. Our HR colleagues are having to help us with the whole workforce redesign. So this is beginning to have a massive sort of ripple effect across the wider council, which is good. Now, part of our procurement processes, we have a really big commitment to social value, and it's in addition to whatever we normally talk about in procurement around price and quality. So we've got some interesting information coming in from just as part of the procurement process at the moment about how people are going to help us with that wider agenda that's covered in our social value policy. So we're having proper conversations with tech companies about how they're going to help us also reduce loneliness, how they're going to help us reduce our carbon emissions, how they're going to help us make us a greener city, how they're going to say loneliness, how they're going to help us with homelessness. So the big issues that were there for us as a city. It's great that we're doing this tech work over here around health and social care, but we've got to get involved in all of this as well. And it kind of brings my big point out about partnerships is that we want to through this work, change the nature of the relationship with people like Helena. So previously, Helena and I would have been customers and suppliers, and we would have had a conversation where you'd have knocked on my door and said, do you want to buy this? And I would have gone through some kind of process and gone, yes, no. And
Or
then
slam the door.
Slam the door and say, oh, God, that bloody woman from Microsoft.
I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad.
So we want to move away from that kind of relationship to a proper partnership, and that partnership means that when you come and talk to me, Helena, you have to tell me as well about the green issues and homelessness and how you're going to help make Manchester a better place to live, how your workforce is going to earn the national living wage, how you're going to have apprenticeships, how you're going to work with our schools. So all of that is as important as price and quality going forward for us. And carbon reduction, we're one of the councils that has declared a climate emergency. So right now, it's right at the top of what we're doing. So if you don't say carbon reduction 50 times and work it out in miles and therefore CO2, the conversation ends, I'm afraid. Right, so we've got another quiz question. I think this might be the last one, don't worry.
I think so.
So, have you been able to secure investment to scale up your ambitions? I'm just quite interested to know how you're approaching that. Because we always want to learn as well when we're doing these things, not just come and talk at you. It'd be really interesting to, we can maybe pick it up in the questions if somebody has got a good way of getting any money, has learned how to do business cases, got any good tips. So it's not as bad as I thought. 43% are on yes, so that's really good. So there might be some good ideas in the audience about how we could take that further as a sector. So last slide from me.
And from me.
Is it you?
No, it's me.
It's me, okay. So
Just generally the last one.
I think what we're trying to say, I hope we've got it across, is that we're really trying to focus on whole system change. That's the first thing. That we're across health and social care, but also across the wider local authority, that we want to develop a new partnership with, a new relationship with suppliers. That's about partnerships. We really, really want to get it right for individuals. So the bit about it being person-centred absolutely goes without saying, but person-centred and data-driven is quite a challenge and is certainly for us something new. We think that if we can get it right for individuals, then if there's enough of them that happens to, we'll get it right. We'll start to get it right for the whole population. And once we start to get it right for the whole population, in terms of our pool budget and the way that the Devo deal works, if we can start to move money from the expensive end up here and plough it back into this end, we can do more prevention, we can do more early intervention. And that means that over the 10 years, we've got a better chance of doing something about the 55 years and the 72 years. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, there's somebody at the back
There's the guy
with
over
a
with the
microphone.
mic.
And if you've got any questions, comments, tips, please feel free to put your hand up.
Someone must have one. No.
Anybody? Does it seem to make sense?
Inspiring.
Oh, thank you. Do you want to say something about that? Oh, you've broken the duck now.
Here comes the man with the mic. Hold on up for the mic.
Here we go, here we go.
A little no.
Hi, Jill Austin. I work with TSA as a training associate, so I have recently got involved with Nicky and the team from a frontline aspect with the workforce, and just from the few sessions that I've delivered, and obviously going forward there's going to be some more, the buy-in from staff and the enthusiasm from the workforce tells me that you're doing something right, because they feel valued, they feel supported. Yes, it's a little bit scary because it is a big change for them, but they do feel valued and involved, which I think from my perspective as a trainer is very encouraging. So, well done.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your help as well, because we are really determined that this is about people and not about technology. And this has to start with our staff, and they have to embrace it and help us make it happen.
Yeah. That is very evident even in a few short sessions. So
Good.
Workforce are definitely on board.
Oh, there's a question in the middle. really helpfully placed
Mr.
right in the
Wirral
middle.
has got a question.
Who chooses to sit right in the middle? I don't know. Just so the Annika Rice moment with the
Hi,
mic
Michael.
was,
What would you like to add?
Hi, Nicky. I'm just wondering, you talk about the Devo deal, and
Yeah.
that's enabled things to happen. We haven't got one in Wirral. We haven't got one in the Liverpool City region either.
Yeah.
Do you think it's still possible to pull that off? Because is it about the deal, or is it about the relationships?
Do you know what? I think it's about the mindset. I think what Devo did was it made us think, right, we could do something different. And it spurred us on to be really radical, to do different, to do something different rather than doing things differently, like I said at the beginning. So it helps, absolutely, that we've got a streamlined architecture now with one of everything, one commissioning body. Well, no, you've only got one commissioning body. One hospital, you've only got one hospital. And one out-of-hospital organisation, you've got one of those too. So in those terms, there's no reason why you couldn't do it. I know you are doing it. You have to get into this whole new space about business cases and tracking people and making the case. I know you've done that too. And you have to be bold about what you want to ask for in terms of the money. So the bit that's maybe different is that if I achieve a result, I can get the money moved. But you could make that money in a different way, and there's other opportunities to have some money to help you in year two. You could go and get some external funding. You could find some kind of income stream. You might even be able to do a deal with Arrow Park Hospital without a Devo deal. So, there's got to be something in it for everybody here, and there is something in it for them because, they're not going to close beds if you reduce the occupancy rate, but they could do elective operations and they get more money for that. So I think if you're from local government, you need to learn about the national tariff because the drivers for the hospital are as important as they're all broke as well. Yeah. They're really obsessed with their 4-hour target at A&E and DTOC figures. They get into big trouble. They get fined if people are in hospital longer than when they're medically optimised and need to go home. So if you can find a driver in the NHS and persuade them as part of your business case that it's in everybody's interest to have, if you have to go to hospital, you have to go, but that's as quick and painless as possible, and that frees up a bed for them to do a planned hip operation. They get loads more money for a planned hip operation than an unplanned hip operation. So it's helped. I can't say it hasn't. It has helped, but maybe you should persuade Mersey region, whatever you're called, Devo Mersey, it's not called that, but that they should have a health and social care deal.
Yeah. I think...
Go on, I dare you.
I think the other thing I'd just mention is, we all know that the NHS long-term plan is very scant in its references to social care. But if you unpick the detail, and I can't quite remember which page it is, it talks about the evolution from STP to ICS and then
that was on the slide.
onto Devo at the end. And I think if we think about some of that machinery, if you like. Who knows what's going to obviously happen politically over, the coming weeks and months. But, we certainly read that as quite an interesting statement about the direction of travel. It's somewhere.
It's gone.
It's gone.
Right, it's gone.
Anyway,
now.
it's in
Okay.
there somewhere. It's in one of the 176.
I think the slide decks will be
pages.
coming out to you. There's
Yeah.
there it goes. In the
That
bottom
little bit
corner,
down there.
2.6.
Yeah.
So
Page
that, in a
34.
way, gives you the legitimacy. It's in the long-term plan to do what we're doing, and we've taken that from Manchester and put it in our locality plan. So person-centred, data-driven is in our locality plan. And at the moment, this is the way that we've decided to do that. There may be other things come along, but this is the way we're going at the moment.
Oh, got another question? Oh, it's going to be a tricky one.
Oh, no.
It isn't. But there are two parts to it. So, Nicky and Helena, has there been any conflicts in your relationship in the public sector and the private sector in these developments and in these systems change? And if there has, how have you overcome them?
I think, shall I answer that one? I'll give it a go.
Yeah,
I
will provide a reflection on it too. But yeah, go on.
I think conflict is too strong a word. So there have been some disagreements.
Did tell me off once. Is what she
No, not with them actually. There have been some differences of opinion. Let's put it that way. So we have used that as an opportunity. So I'm a commissioner as well to try and reshape the market a little bit. So we've just got years and years of experience of just accepting what we're given. So we are really trying hard to shape the market. So we've done that a couple of ways. So big debate about the data and who owns it and where does it sit, and is it in the cloud, and is it my data, or is it a provider's data, or is it Mrs. Jones's data? Who's the data owner? Who's the data processor? Who's that? So all of those kind of discussions have had to happen. And we've parted company with a few people who didn't want to give us the data, who thought the data was theirs, who didn't want to open up their API. Why wouldn't you do that? Who wanted things to go through their call centres, not work with us, with our call. You know, we don't want a third-hand call. It's being pinged all around the country. We want it just to come, we want an alert to go off and for it to come to us in Manchester so that we can deal with it in 2 hours. We don't want it being pinged all around the country. And the data actually belongs to Mrs. Jones. So we have not gone the whole journey with some people because they weren't able to kind of get over that. And I think that's what Alison was trying to say before lunch, is that we've kind of come to a crossroads. And for any of you in the audience who are suppliers, these are the things you've got to think about. You know, you can't hold on to the data anymore because this isn't just what Manchester wants to do. We might be a couple of months ahead of everybody else, but everyone else is following in our wake. We've got a big queue of local authorities who want to go digital, who want to go mobile, who want to go agile, they want to go wearable, and they want the data to stay, the ownership to belong with Mrs. Jones, but for the management of it to be in the cloud for working with the rest of it, shared across the system, with all the right permissions and all of that being sorted out. And we've had a really good session with NHSX about that. Their Director of Data is helping us to make sure we get all that right. But yes, so conflict's too strong a word, but disagreements along the way about the way forward.
Yeah, and you know, I think I'd just say from our standpoint as well, we're desperate to see some more innovation at scale in this market, and whether that's fantastic customers, authorities delivering on that, which is always, to be honest, the very, very best place for that innovation to be, but also from the supplier landscape. So we're quite aware this is a really, really bold, ambitious plan, but I think and the way in which Nicky and the team are delivering it is very bold and ambitious. But for others, we are now working with some of the suppliers down the way there on actually how could you package something like this up so that it's a little bit easier to do, might not be quite so ambitious, but is therefore more achievable. And I think my reflection would be that we've had to learn to speak each other's languages. There has been some, there's been some translation, but I think it's been, I hope anyway, mutually enriching. Did you have a second one, or?
Oh, it was two. I think
it was
two
parts. Happy times. Any more? Oh, there we go.
It's hot under the lights, isn't it?
It's just a little bit bedazzling.
Paul.
My question's, it's because we work in sort of like a complex environment, and we're looking to get savings. What assurance have you given back to the system that this can happen?
Okay, so there is a whole army of bean counters, as you would imagine, sat behind me. They mostly sit in finance, audit and commissioning. They're the people I put a disguise on as I'm going past, pretend I'm not there. So they're the people who are dead keen to see this happen. There's a whole governance process behind all of this that, endless papers have to be written and trackers about tracking savings and tracking outcomes and how many less people have been to hospital and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So yeah, there's a big industry behind it. I started off by saying we had 50 million from the Transformation Fund, and that's all got to deliver a three times return on investment as a minimum. It's slowly, steadily rising to about 5 before you'll get any money, just because of the pressures within the system. And in that kind of monitoring and tracking of those new care models, not all of them have made it. So we're still there because we're delivering now, but there's a couple of others that haven't been able to deliver the goods and they've just been knocked on the head. So I think it's quite an agile approach there as well in terms of not just carrying on with a dead duck. If it's not working, just stop it. But I think what's good and has given everybody a bit of reassurance is it started to attract other money. So in a way, And that other money doesn't have savings attached to it, and that's the kind of money I like, because you can innovate a bit more with that money, because you're not worried about, am I going to get to £5 or £15? And I think, I can just feel in the last couple of months, the financial situation is dire. It is dire, but there's promises of more money nationally from the current government, and if we have an election, a future government maybe. We've got a 1-year financial plan instead of a 3-year financial plan, so that's put a bit of pressure on, because what will happen after that 1 year, because we've kind of got into 3-year financial planning. But it does feel to me a little bit that the tide is turning away from that kind of hard-nosed money thing, just going back to focusing on outcomes, which makes me feel better, because that's what we're here for, is make people's lives better. So I can feel a little bit of a kind of a move back into familiar territory and less about the banker.
Great.
Are we done?
Lovely.
Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.